Charlotte Simmon glanced at the clock on her phone and muttered under her breath. Great. 20 minutes behind already. She twisted her long braids into a bun, securing them with the first elastic band she could find on her cluttered dresser. A quick sweep of foundation, a hint of blush, and a coat of mascara, just enough to look alert even if she didn't feel it. She pulled on her navy wool coat, looped a scarf around her neck, and grabbed her worn leather tote before darting out the door. The winter air hit her like a slap. The cold had a bite to it, damp from the steady drizzle that had turned the sidewalks into slick mirrors. By the time she reached the bus stop, her shoes were already wet, her toes tingling. The bus arrived late, packed with commuters who looked just as miserable as she felt. Charlotte squeezed in, gripping a pole, while someone's damp umbrella dripped onto her coat sleeve. She kept her head down, earbuds in, the rain-smeared city blurring past the window. When the bus finally hissed to a stop in front of Baldwin Financial Solutions, she stepped out into the puddles, shoulders hunched. She was halfway to the revolving glass doors when something on the sidewalk caught her eye. A brown leather wallet, its surface glistening under the rain. People streamed past without so much as a glance. A man nearly stepped on it before sidestepping, muttering about being late. Charlotte paused, her hand tightening on her tote strap. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. What you give to the world comes back to you, Charlotte. Always choose to give the good. With a sigh, she crouched, rain soaking the knees of her slacks, and picked up the wallet. It was heavier than she expected, its edges worn soft with use. She tucked it into her coat pocket, shivering as the wind whipped around her. One more delay in an already frantic morning. But somehow she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Charlotte slipped through the revolving doors, shaking the rain from her coat. "Morning, Miss Simmon," the security guard called with a smile. "Morning, Mr. Harris," she replied, flashing him a quick grin before nodding to the receptionist at the front desk. By the time she reached her desk on the 15th floor, her stockings were clinging uncomfortably to her legs. She ducked under her workstation to pull out the box where she kept an emergency pair of the flats, trading her soggy heels for dry, soft leather. The phone on her desk rang almost instantly. "Charlotte, can you come in here?" Her boss, Robert Lane, the senior VP of marketing, barked through the line. "Yes, sir," she said, already grabbing her notepad. From there, the day became a blur, typing up reports, fielding calls, printing materials for a last-minute meeting. She barely had time to breathe, much less think about the damp wallet still in her coat pocket. It wasn't until her stomach growled loudly at 12:47 p.m. that she remembered she hadn't even had coffee, let alone lunch. She grabbed her salad from the break-room fridge, dropped into her chair, and finally pulled the wallet out. The leather was a deep chestnut. Worn at the corners, she flipped it open, careful not to disturb anything inside. A neat stack of credit cards, a driver's license, a crisp $100 bill folded twice, and tucked into a clear plastic sleeve, a photo. It was of a man and a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. She had a missing front tooth and a gap-toothed grin that made Charlotte smile in spite of herself. The man had warm hazel eyes and a confident smile, his arm wrapped protectively around the child. Charlotte glanced at the name on the license, Cameron Forrest. Her eyes widened slightly at the company listed on one of the business cards, Forrest Tech Solutions. Even she knew that name. He was the founder and CEO, the kind of man who ended up in Forbes and gave keynote speeches at tech conferences. She closed the wallet gently, leaning back in her chair. She could have just turned it in to the building's lost and found. But something about that little girl's smile made her want to return it personally. Pulling out her phone, she typed Forrest Tech Solutions into the search bar, found the main line, and pressed call. "Hello, Forrest Tech Solutions," came a bright voice. "Yes, hello," Charlotte said, sitting a little straighter. "My name is Charlotte Simmon, and I believe I found something that belongs to Mr. Cameron Forrest." There was a pause, then a slightly more urgent tone. "One moment, please." As she waited, Charlotte had no idea that this small act of kindness was about to change her life entirely. Charlotte didn't have to wait long on the line. A warm, deep voice came through. "This is Cameron Forrest. Mr. Forrest, my name is Charlotte Simmon. I believe I have your wallet." There was a sharp inhale, followed by genuine relief. "You have no idea how much you've just saved my day. I've been retracing my steps all morning. Is there a way I can meet you to get it back?" "I'd like to thank you properly." Charlotte hesitated. "I'm on my lunch break right now. There's a coffee shop across from my office." "Perfect. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The bell over the coffee shop door jingled as Charlotte stepped inside, shaking off the cold. She claimed a small table near the window, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea for warmth. She didn't have to guess when Cameron arrived. The man who walked in had the kind of presence that made people glance twice. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal coat that fit him perfectly. But it wasn't just him. A little girl with caramel brown curls clung to his hand, her big hazel eyes scanning the room. Charlotte stood, smiling. "Mr. Forrest? Please, call me Cameron." His smile reached his eyes, but there was a flicker of urgency in his movements. He reached into his pocket. Before anything else, she held up a hand. "No need. I just wanted to make sure it got back to you." She pulled the wallet from her bag and placed it on the table. Amber eyed her curiously, half hiding behind Cameron's leg. Charlotte crouched slightly to her level. "Hi there, I'm Charlotte." The girl hesitated, then stepped forward. "I'm Amber." "Pretty name," Charlotte said warmly. "I like your scarf. Pink's my favorite color." Amber's smile appeared like a sunrise. As Cameron tucked the wallet away, he studied Charlotte. "May I ask, why?" Most people would have left it or turned it in expecting a reward. She shrugged lightly, but her voice softened. "My mom used to tell me, what you give to the world comes back to you." She believed kindness was worth the effort. Something in his expression shifted. A quiet respect, a spark of interest. "You're not like everyone else." Before he could say more, his phone buzzed loudly on the table. He glanced at the screen and a small crease formed between his brows. "I've got to go, I'm sorry." Charlotte waved it off with a polite smile. "I understand. That's the world you live in, right?" He gave her one last look, almost like he wanted to say something else. But then he was gone. Amber behind, the coffee shop bell jingling behind them. That night, after a bedtime story and warm blankets, Amber looked up at her dad with a serious expression. "Daddy, you didn't thank Miss Charlotte properly." "I told her I appreciated it," Cameron said, confused. "That's not enough," Amber declared. "You had a lot in that wallet. She needs flowers and tickets to the Broadway show." He chuckled. "Tickets for her and me?" Amber shook her head, curls bouncing. "With us, because she likes pink like me, and she's really pretty." Cameron's lips quirked into a smile. But there was something thoughtful in his eyes as he kissed his daughter's forehead. "All right, I'll see what I can do." The next afternoon, Charlotte returned from making coffee in the break room to find a large bouquet of pale pink roses sitting on her desk, their scent drifting through the air. Tucked between the blooms was an envelope. Inside, she found glossy Broadway tickets and a note written in strong, deliberate handwriting. "For the woman who reminded me that kindness still exists. Dinner before the show?" Cameron Forrest. Charlotte stared at the note, a slow, surprised smile spreading across her face. Charlotte smoothed her dress as she stepped out of the cab, her breath clouding in the crisp night air. She spotted Cameron standing outside the restaurant, sharp in a navy suit, with Amber bundled in a pink coat and matching knit hat. "Hi," Charlotte greeted, smiling at them both. Amber grinned. "Hi, Miss Charlotte, this was my idea, you know." Cameron chuckled. "That's true." As they walked inside and settled into a cozy booth, Charlotte raised a curious brow. "Your idea, huh?" Amber nodded seriously. "Yep, Daddy was just going to say thank you, but I told him we needed to do something fun. And I like Broadway shows, and dinner." Charlotte laughed. "Well, I think you made a great choice." Over dinner, Amber's natural shyness melted away. Between bites of spaghetti, she told Charlotte about her favorite teacher, the book she was reading about a girl detective, and her collection of plush animals that have their own kingdom. "And Flopsy the bunny is the queen." Amber added proudly. Charlotte leaned in, fascinated. A queen bunny? That's the kind of story I'd read. Amber giggled and asked about Charlotte's favorite book, color, and toys when she was a little girl. Charlotte told her about climbing trees in her grandmother's backyard, reading Anne of Green Gables, and playing with a battered set of building blocks until she was almost too old for them. Cameron sat back, quietly taking it in. It struck him how easily Amber talked to Charlotte, how her laughter seemed brighter, freer. Usually, Amber needed weeks to warm up to someone new. Tonight, she was glowing. The theater was already buzzing when they arrived for the show. Charlotte took the aisle seat, Amber in the middle, Cameron on the other side, just before the lights dimmed. Amber reached out and slipped her small hand into Charlotte's, and then, with her other, into her father's. Charlotte glanced over Amber's head at Cameron. Their eyes met in the half-light, and something unspoken passed between them. The performance was dazzling. Bright costumes, soaring songs, laughter rippling through the audience. But for Charlotte, the real magic was sitting beside her. Outside, the air was colder, their breath visible in the streetlight glow. Cameron walked Charlotte to the corner where a cab waited. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For tonight. For everything." She smiled, tucking her hands into her coat pockets. "It was wonderful. Amber's pretty great company. She thinks the same about you." They stood there for a moment, as if both were aware of the space between them, the kind of space that could be closed with a kiss. But instead, they shared a lingering look, a gentle goodnight, and Charlotte slid into the cab. As the car pulled away, she caught sight of Amber waving through the rear window, her pink hat bobbing. And Charlotte realized she was already looking forward to the next time. The days that followed their Broadway night seemed to take on a new rhythm. It started with a phone call the next morning, Cameron, checking to make sure she got to work safely in the icy weather. Then another call the next day, this time just to share a funny thing Amber had said at breakfast. Soon, they were speaking every day, their conversations weaving seamlessly between light-hearted banter and quiet, personal moments. On Tuesdays, he would appear in the lobby of Baldwin Financial Solutions with a takeout coffee and a warm bagel for her. "Your boss said you skipped breakfast," he'd say with a teasing smile. On Fridays, she would drop off small envelopes for Amber at his office, a handmade card, a new bookmark, sometimes a pack of stickers. One Thursday evening, Charlotte stopped by Cameron's apartment to return a book Amber had lent her. She found Cameron in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, flipping blueberry pancakes for dinner. "It's our tradition," he explained, grinning. "Breakfast for dinner whenever we feel like it." They ate at the counter, music playing softly from the speakers. When a slow, jazzy song came on, Cameron took the spatula from her hand and set it down. "Kitchen dance party," he said simply, and before she could protest, he was twirling her gently in the narrow space. She laughed until her cheeks hurt. By the end of the week, Charlotte was beginning to realize something. She wasn't just enjoying Cameron's company, she was falling for him. And she wasn't sure how to feel about it. One afternoon, as she was packing up to leave work, her boss, Robert Lane, called her into his office. "You and Cameron Forrest seem friendly," he said, his tone deliberately casual. Charlotte frowned. "We've spent some time together, yes." "Why?" Robert leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "People talk, Charlotte, and when they see a senior executive assistant spending time with a powerful CEO who's meeting with our company, they start wondering about motives." The words stung more than she wanted to admit. "If you're implying—" "I'm not implying anything," he interrupted smoothly. "Just be careful. The corporate world can be unforgiving when it comes to perceptions." Charlotte left the office with her stomach in knots. She'd done nothing wrong, but the warning echoed in her head long after she stepped into the cold evening air. For the first time since she'd picked up that wallet in the rain, she wondered if she was stepping into something far more complicated than she'd realized. Charlotte hadn't seen Cameron in 3 days, an unusually long gap for them, when he called one Saturday morning. "Do we meet for coffee?" His voice was warm but faintly distracted. "There's something I should tell you in person." Curiosity tugged at her, but she agreed. 20 minutes later, she spotted him through the cafe's front window, already seated at a corner table. He stood when she approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Charlotte, this is Rebecca." The woman beside him rose gracefully from her seat. She was striking, tall, with sleek chestnut hair, a designer coat, and a confidence that radiated like perfume. Her handshake was cool, her gaze assessing. "Rebecca is Amber's mother," Cameron explained. "She just got back into town." "I wanted to reconnect with my daughter," Rebecca said, her voice smooth, almost pleasant. But there was a subtle edge underneath. "And of course I had to meet the woman who's been spending time with her." Charlotte forced a polite smile. "Amber's a wonderful girl." "Yes," Rebecca said, her eyes locking on Charlotte. "She is. Which is why I'm very careful about the people around her." The implication wasn't lost on Charlotte. The rest of the meeting passed in strained, small talk. Rebecca kept her hand lightly on Cameron's forearm whenever she spoke, laughing at his responses, like they shared a private joke. Charlotte noticed the way Cameron politely endured it, his attention flicking back to her every so often. But it didn't stop the unease settling in her stomach. When Rebecca finally excused herself, saying she had a lunch reservation, Charlotte let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Cameron rubbed the back of his neck. "She can be direct. But she's still Amber's mother, and I have to let her see her." "I understand," Charlotte said softly. And she did. But something about the way Rebecca had looked at her, like she was an obstacle to be removed, lingered. Later that week, Charlotte was leaving work when her boss Robert intercepted her at the elevator. "Word is, Cameron Forrest's ex-wife is back," he said casually. "You might want to think about keeping a low profile. These situations, they can get messy." As she rode down in silence, Charlotte couldn't help wondering if Rebecca's sudden reappearance had less to do with Amber and more to do with Cameron. And if that was the case, Charlotte had just stepped into the middle of something far more personal and dangerous than she ever intended. The first hint of trouble came on a Wednesday evening. Charlotte had planned to stop by Cameron's apartment to drop off a new art set for Amber, something she'd mentioned wanting during dinner the week before. But when she arrived, bouquet of crayons and paints in hand, it was Rebecca who answered the door. "Oh," Rebecca said, her smile polite but thin. "Cameron's running late. Amber's with me tonight." Charlotte hesitated. "I was just bringing this for her." Rebecca glanced at the package, then stepped forward, blocking the doorway just enough to make her point. "That's thoughtful. But you know, she's very sensitive. I'd hate for her to get too attached. Children can be easily confused when new people come and go." Charlotte felt her cheeks heat, but she managed to keep her voice even. "I'm not planning on going anywhere." Rebecca's eyes flickered, a smile without warmth. "We'll see." She took the package, thanked her curtly, and closed the door. Over the next week, Amber seemed quieter when Charlotte was around. At dinner one night, she sat close to Cameron and avoided Charlotte's gaze, giving only short answers to her questions. When Cameron stepped away to take a call, Charlotte leaned toward her. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Amber fiddled with her napkin. "Mom says, maybe you don't really like kids, that you just like daddy." The words landed like a punch. "Amber, that's not true." Cameron returned before she could finish, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Charlotte kept her expression calm, but her chest felt tight. That night, after dropping Charlotte off, Cameron seemed distracted. "She's been through a lot," he said quietly. "Rebecca's protective. Maybe it's too soon for Amber to get this close." Charlotte turned to him, hurt flashing in her eyes. "You're not saying you believe her, are you?" He didn't answer right away, which told her more than words could. "I just want to be careful," he said finally. Charlotte nodded, but inside, the sting deepened. She had returned that wallet out of nothing but kindness, and now it felt like she was slowly being cast as the villain in someone else's story. As she stepped out of the car, she couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca was winning. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Charlotte had last seen Amber's bright, unguarded smile. Every visit felt different now. Careful, watched, as if Rebecca's invisible hand was always in the room. Charlotte tried to shake it off, focusing on work. But one Friday evening, as she left the office late, she spotted a familiar figure across the street, standing in the warm glow of a restaurant window. Rebecca. She was leaning across a small table toward another woman Charlotte didn't recognize, her posture loose and confident. The other woman laughed, covering her mouth, while Rebecca's own smile sharpened. Something about the scene tugged at Charlotte, and she found herself stepping into the cafe, slipping into a seat near the window where she could still hear through the open vent above the glass. "He's so easy to read," Rebecca was saying, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "Amber's the perfect lever. Make her doubt Charlotte and Cameron follows. He'll let her go without even realizing I pushed." The other woman arched a brow. "And you're sure you want him back?" Rebecca's laugh was low and cynical. "Not him, his influence, his money. He's more useful to me on my side than in the hands of some doe-eyed assistant who thinks a Broadway ticket means she's special." Charlotte's heart pounded, a mix of shock and anger rising hot in her chest. She pulled out her phone, hit record, and captured every word. When Rebecca finally left, Charlotte stayed seated, replaying the audio, just to be sure she hadn't imagined it. No, it was all there, crystal clear. Later that night, Charlotte sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open but untouched. She stared at her phone, at the recording, her thumb hovering over Cameron's contact. Part of her wanted to storm over and play it for him immediately. Another part feared he would think she'd been looking for dirt. But one thing was certain: Rebecca's hold over both Cameron and Amber was built on lies, and if Charlotte didn't act soon, she might lose them both for good. She took a deep breath, pressing call. "Charlotte?" Cameron's voice came through, warm but wary. "You need to talk," she said, her tone steady. "And you need to hear something." Cameron opened the door before Charlotte had even knocked twice. He looked tired, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair slightly mussed, like he'd been pacing. "You said it was important," he said. "It is." She stepped inside, her grip tight on her phone. "Please, just listen before you say anything." He nodded cautiously. Charlotte pressed play. Rebecca's voice spilled into the room, sharp and calculating. "Amber's the perfect lever. Make her doubt Charlotte, and Cameron follows. He'll let her go without even realizing I pushed. He's more useful to me on my side than in the hands of some doe-eyed assistant who thinks a Broadway ticket means she's special." The air between them went heavy. When the recording ended, Cameron's jaw flexed. "When did you hear this?" "Tonight. She was talking to a friend at a restaurant. I didn't go looking for this, Cameron. I just couldn't walk away when I realized what she was doing." He dragged a hand over his face. "I should have trusted you." Charlotte swallowed. "But you didn't, and that's the part I can't just pretend away." The next day, Cameron played the recording for Rebecca when she came to pick up Amber. Her expression shifted from smug to pale, but she offered no real defense. Amber overheard enough to understand that her mother had lied. Later, Charlotte found herself kneeling in front of Amber in the hallway. "Sweetheart, none of what she said about me was true. You mean the world to me." Amber's eyes glistened. "I know, I'm sorry I believed her." She hugged Charlotte tight. That evening, Cameron tried to bridge the space between them. "I want to make this right," he said, his tone soft but urgent. "For you, for Amber, for us." Charlotte held his gaze for a long moment. "I believe you mean that, but I also think we need space, at least for now." His brow furrowed. "Space? I can't just pick up where we left off, Cameron. Not after everything. But I do want to keep talking to Amber. She's part of my life now, no matter what happens between us." He nodded slowly, the disappointment in his eyes unmistakable. "If that's what you need, I'll respect it." Charlotte left that night with her heart heavy, but certain of one thing: she wouldn't lose the little girl who had taken her hand at that Broadway show. Every evening after, she and Amber spoke on the phone. They talked about school, books, and Flopsy the Bunny Queen. And while the calls made her smile, they also reminded her of what she was missing, and what she wasn't yet ready to have back. Cameron was at Baldwin Financial for an early strategy meeting with Jeremy Davis, the company's CEO. As he stepped out of the conference room, portfolio in hand, he told himself he'd just head straight to his car. But his feet carried him toward the marketing floor anyway. It had been weeks since he'd seen Charlotte in person. Maybe, he thought, a quick hello wouldn't hurt. He spotted her before she saw him, standing near the reception desk, laughing, her arms wrapped warmly around a tall man in a gray coat. The hug lingered. Her smile was wide, her eyes bright. Cameron's chest tightened. Without another glance, he turned and walked toward the elevator, jaw set. The next few days he was quieter than usual. Amber noticed. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked over dinner one night, twirling pasta around her fork. "Nothing," he said, forcing a smile. Amber frowned. "You don't sound like nothing." She didn't press further, but the next afternoon, she called Charlotte. "Miss Charlotte, I think something's wrong with Daddy. He's not the same lately. Will you come talk to him? And not sure, sweetheart, please, for me." The following evening, Charlotte knocked on his door, unannounced that evening. Cameron opened it, surprise flickering across his face. "I heard from Amber you've been off," she said, stepping inside. He gave a small shrug, his tone clipped. "I'm happy for you, that you found someone you can trust with your heart." Her brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The guy you were hugging at Baldwin," he said. His voice edged with something between jealousy and resignation. Realization dawned, and she stared at him in disbelief. "You mean my cousin? He's visiting from out of town." Cameron's mouth opened, then closed again. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I assumed." "Exactly," she cut in, her voice sharp but controlled. "You assumed, just like you assumed Rebecca was telling the truth about me." Amber, sensing the tension, padded into the room. "Please don't fight," she said softly. "Can't you just talk to each other?" Cameron's shoulders dropped. He looked at Charlotte, his voice quieter now. "I have trust issues, Charlotte. Rebecca was unfaithful. She left me for another man. I've been carrying it around for years, and when I saw you," he shook his head. It brought it all back. Charlotte's voice softened, but there was still hurt in her eyes. "And it didn't occur to you to just ask me? You are quick to believe a woman who left you and her own child over me." That's what hurt the most. Cameron swallowed hard. "You're right. I messed up. I'm still figuring out how to let someone in without expecting them to walk away." Amber glanced between them. "So, can you try, for me?" Charlotte and Cameron's eyes met, the silence stretching between them. Finally, Charlotte gave a small nod. "For her," she said. Cameron's lips curved into the faintest smile. "For her." Amber beamed, taking each of their hands and squeezing them together. "Good. Now maybe we can all have dinner without being weird." They laughed, quietly but together, and for the first time in weeks, the tension began to fade. The weeks that followed felt different, calmer, steadier. Cameron didn't try to rush things with Charlotte. Instead, he focused on showing her, day by day, that his trust was more than words. He called when he said he would. He showed up for lunch when he promised. And when business travel took him out of the city, he made sure Charlotte heard from him every night, even if it was just a quick video call. Amber noticed too. She would grin when she caught her dad slipping a cup of coffee onto Charlotte's desk or sneaking her favorite chocolate croissant into her bag. The biggest change came one Saturday morning, when Rebecca arrived to pick up Amber for the weekend. Cameron met her at the door, his stance calm but firm. "We need to be clear," he said, keeping his voice low but steady. "Your personal life is yours, mine is mine. You don't speak about Charlotte to Amber, not in a way that questions her character or our relationship. And you don't use Amber to get to me." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "And if I do? Then we'll revisit custody," Cameron said simply. "Amber's stability comes first. Always." Rebecca gave a small, tight smile, but she didn't argue. She left with Amber without another word, and Cameron shut the door, knowing the line had finally been drawn. Later that evening, Cameron joined Charlotte and Amber for a quiet dinner at Charlotte's apartment. They cooked together, Amber stirring sauce, while Cameron chopped vegetables and Charlotte handled the bread. It felt easy, natural. After Amber had gone to bed in the guest room, Cameron lingered in the kitchen with Charlotte. I know I can't erase what happened, he said. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. I want you to know you can count on me. Not just when things are good, but especially when they're not. Charlotte studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Actions over time, Cameron. That's how trust is rebuilt. He smiled faintly. Then I'll make every one count. She leaned against him, just enough for their shoulders to touch. They didn't need grand declarations. Not tonight. What they had was something steadier. And maybe more important, a real chance to get it right. And for the first time in a long while, they were both ready to take it. The real change came 3 months later. Cameron had been patient, letting his actions speak louder than promises, and Charlotte had slowly let the walls down. One evening over dinner, he reached across the table and took her hand. There's a fundraiser this Friday for the tech literacy program. I'd like you to come with me. She smiled. I'd love to. He hesitated for only a heartbeat before adding, and I want to introduce you as my girlfriend, if you're okay with that. Her cheeks warmed. Are you sure? He held her gaze steadily. Yes, I'm ready to move forward, with you, to something real. Charlotte's chest fluttered in a way she hadn't felt in years. Then I guess I'm yours. The ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers, guests mingling in tailored suits and elegant gowns. Cameron kept Charlotte close, his hand at the small of her back, as he introduced her to colleagues, investors, and old friends. It didn't take long for Rebecca to appear. She looked flawless, her smile polished, but there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes when Cameron approached with Charlotte at his side. Rebecca, he said evenly, I want you to know, we are dating and Charlotte is my girlfriend. Rebecca's smile tightened. I've heard Amber told me. Cameron toned cool. We're in a serious relationship, and I want to be clear, you are not to interfere. If you do, we won't hesitate to release the recording of you manipulating Amber and me. Rebecca's painted smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, her meeting them both. Enjoy your evening, she said before slipping away into the crowd. Charlotte exhaled slowly once she was gone. Well, that was direct. Cameron smiled faintly. I'm done leaving room for misunderstandings. The fundraiser wound down hours later, the city lights glittering outside as Cameron walked Charlotte to her car. You handled yourself well tonight, he said softly. But then, you always do. Charlotte tilted her head. And you handled Rebecca. His gaze lingered on hers, warm and certain. I told you I was ready for something real. Before she could reply, he leaned in, slow enough for her to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was both gentle and full of promise. The kind that said the worst was behind them, and the best was still ahead. When they parted, Charlotte's smile matched his. Something real, she murmured. Always, he promised, and for the first time since that rainy morning, the future felt wide open. The end. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tale. Please support our channel with comments, likes, and subscribe.